right now I'm going to do a mute all, and if Joaquin is available, he's going to unmute himself to come in because right now I've got it on mute all,
I'm
and
here.
Joaquin's here, and
Yes, sir.
I'm going to drop out. Joaquin, say it again.
Hi. There
There
we
he
are.
is.
All right. So I was making a 4-axis column or stem for this wine goblet. And you can, let me see if I can get a little better light on here so you can see the facets. And Brad of Brad's Workbench was watching me live and said, hey, can you do that and make a pen? And so of course I wasn't going to back down to the challenge with a live audience. And I said, yes. So I did. So what I'm going to do is talk you through the steps I used to make a 4-axis pen. Now, this is obviously a little bit big, but if you have a 4-axis twist multi-turning and it's small enough, you can feel that your fingers, as you hold a pen, fit the 4 axes, the 3 facets. It feels really good. And nobody expected that in myself, Brad, nobody expected that you picked it up and it felt really good. And what's really cool is it's always going to twist counterclockwise, but it feels good left or right-handed. So I found that to be very interesting. So this was just a proof of concept. I was just goofing around. So I started racking my brain about how I was going to make that smaller. And my first idea was, this was a mandrel I made for a rotary device for my laser. And I have a second wheel. I'm not sure where it is, but I thought, well, I'll put the pen on the mandrel and put my axes on the wide part. But, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but the further out from the center you get your axes, the more radical your twist is.
And that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, yeah. So with a pen, if that gets too wild, you're not going to be able to actually make a pen out of it. So that was a thought, and I kind of sat and worked through it and said, no, that's not going to work. So my next thought was, well, is there any reason I can't just do the layout on a pen blank?
No.
And the answer is no, it's just smaller. It's just smaller. So if you're not familiar with multi-axis layout, at least 4-axis, you can actually do this at any multiple of 6, because we have 360 degrees in a circle, and you're dividing by the radius of the circle. So let me explain that real quick. So layout of 4-axis anything, you make a circle and you take the radius of that circle, and you use your dividers, and you walk around. You just walk around the circle with the width of the dividers. I had a pen taped on there, so it's not quite the same. But you walk around the circle with the dividers, and you get 6 even divisions. And then you can even divide those further, and you can get 12, and it multiples of 6. So if you want 4-axis, you're just going to use, and that's a little off because my pen slipped. You're just going to use 1, 3, and 5. Okay. You're going to use 1, 3, and 5. So if you do this and you just line up 1, 3, and 5, and you use those axes, you'll get a triangular piece. If you want the twist, you have to go 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 1. Billy was talking about that a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago. Okay. So when we do this to get the twist, we have to alternate axes, and there's a trick that lets you do it without skipping to the wrong one and getting a little getting it crazy. So some tools you need dividers. These are Harbor Freight, everybody's favorite cheap tool place. It's helpful to have a good vernier caliper. I use, these were both given to me, and I have an actual down to the thousandths with the dial. And this is probably the better to use, but if you can just get one that gives you thousandths, no, hundredths, thousandths. You get one that gives you divisions of thousandths, you can do this. So again, in thought and thinking about it and planning about it, the other thing you need is to know what pen kit you're using. And you need to open up your instructions on your pen kit. And go to the sizes. And this works best if you're using a pen kit that has the same widths on the bushings or very close. But you need to go to the bushings here. So I've got 0.393 and 0.410. And you need to decide which one of those is going to be the diameter of your circle. So I'm going to go with the bigger one. It's a little bit, just because it's just a little bit bigger, so it's a tiny bit easier. So I'm going to set my caliper to 0.205. I want half of that, the radius, half of that diameter. So I go 2 thousandths, 205 thousandths. And then when you make a circle like that, that's really, really tight. So I'm going to think about the size of my hand, and I'm going to think about the, well, that wasn't 205. Hang on a second. That was millimeters. There we go. That's better. 205. Okay. So that's a little better. So that's the radius of my circle. So I'm going to set that in my center, find the center, be confident of center, and I'm going to just use my caliper, or you can use your, well, the dividers come in a minute. Use my caliper, and I'm gonna set that circle in that radius. Now that's really small. It's very, very tight, very close. So again, thinking about, a lot of us make pens that have a little bit of a swell. So thinking about it and thinking about the fact that I'm going to be doing multiple axes and how multiple axes cut. If you want a straight axis, you cut in to get the side straight. You actually try to cut deeper in the middle than you do on the ends. So if you want to get a little bit of a bulge, you cut a little shallower. So I'm sitting and thinking through this and thinking through how I'm going to make this smaller. And I came to the conclusion that if I added about 1/3 again, the width of this, of the diameter of my bushings, that would give me just enough space on the blank to find a kind of a balance where I didn't end up just going through the pen or going through the shaft, because we're working the small diameter. One thing you cannot do, at least I haven't figured it out yet, is drill your pen blank and cut it to length before you make your axes, before you do your turning. So as you're getting close to being finished, you need to remember to put a tenon on one end. And then what I did was I picked a length of the piece that just felt like that looked like about right. I made sure that it fit the tube. So you need your tube, it was the right length for the tube. And so I cut off a little on the end that didn't have the tenon, put it in my chuck, and then drilled it and made sure I just over drilled it. And then I cut it to length and square the ends, glue the tube then, and then put it between centers and turn down to your bushings. Now these take a while. So I'm going to show you how to just do the multi-axes, mount it in the chuck, and drill it. We've all made pens, I hope. if we haven't, we can get into that, but we'll be here till midnight. So the first thing, of course, when you start is get it round. If you have a center that's sharper than a 60-degree center, it helps. And I really have found, because I played with a four tooth center, and mine's 1 inch. It's just too big. So the small step center is really works well. The only tool you need, aside from a good supply of sandpaper for this, is your spindle roughing gouge. This is some Bradford pear. I didn't even realize I had until I started turning it. The pen I made for Brad was maple. Maple took this technique very, very well. So you want to turn your blank as wide as possible. You want as much space as possible, because we're going to be taking our centers to eccentricity. And when it's eccentric, the drive centers are going to be closer to the edge of the wood. So the more meat you have out there, the less chance you have of blowing out your blank. Almost. All right, we're pretty close to round. We're close enough where we can continue. So again, I'm going to make my my diameter a tiny bit bigger so that we do see that there's a twist, but I'm going to keep very close to that range. So this is going to be my circle. And this is the frustrating part, especially when you start getting arthritic, is doing this accurately.
We have Brenda on hand in case you need a Band-Aid.
Okay. Could happen.
They make they make some fairly inexpensive compasses that work pretty good. So you're not doing it with the
caliper.
Yeah, with the calipers.
Yeah.
But the dividers will work too. Yeah.
Yeah, these dividers do okay. The only thing I don't like about these dividers is they don't lock. There's no way to lock them.
Right.
So if you're not paying attention,
they'll spread themselves.
Yeah,
they won't stay circular.
Yeah.
That's what I like about using a compass, is you're drawing a line and it stays in position better.
Yeah. So you just make your 6 points, or you make your 6 steps, and you drive in your point every other step. So those are your axes, and this is very important. Number them. Inside, 1, 2, and it doesn't matter if you go right to left or left to right, clockwise or counterclockwise, it doesn't matter, but put numbers in there so that you can match your axes as you move around. You can put it in your drive center and make your little dents a little bit bigger.
I use a spring-loaded punch to make those dents.
Yeah, I don't have one. I made myself an awl with a 16-penny nail. It's just too big.
There you go.
It's just really big, so it's fat. So this little drive center I have works really well for me. If you use what you have. If you really want to get into it, you can just dig the point of the dividers in there. So when we do this, I almost forgot the important part. This is the trick. So you find your number one, whichever axis you numbered is number one, and bring a line out and mark it. Go back between centers. Find that line. Bring your tool rest up and line it up with that line. And use your tool rest as a straight edge and bring that first axis over. So that is going to be the number one on this side.
Is that the same point as the number one on the other side?
Yes. So what I just did was I took number one here and I translated it to the other end. Now, they go 1, 2, 3 clockwise here, but here they're going to go 1, 2, 3, and it's counterclockwise on the other end. So again, every other spot. And this distance is the radius of your circle. That gives you an even division. That's important. So 1 to 1, 2 to 2. Oh, I better mark that as 1. Which only leaves 3. Now we're working, this is a pen. We are working tiny. So if you have horrible handwriting like me and big clubs for hands, this is a real challenge. So here's how we make this work. We start with 1. For me, for my brain, I always start with 1 on the drive center. And we go to 2 on the tail center. Hang on, I can't see. There it is. Helps if you lock your tailstock. Now you want to hold this tight because you are now not turning in a straight line. You are turning eccentric. But you really don't want, and especially if it's something soft like this Bradford pear, you don't want to drive it in. That will cause issues. Now, safety. Every time you turn eccentric, turn it by hand first and make sure that you're not going to hit your tool rest. You hit the tool rest, especially with the step center, it's going to pop right off and shoot whatever direction it feels like. So in my experience, in order to get a little bit of a ball shape, of a bulbous shape, and a little wider in the middle, rather than coming from the ends and turning and moving downhill like I want it straight, I start in the middle and move out. And I cannot pass the line on the end, the circle. That's my drop dead line. I can't turn it thinner than that. And the reason I can't turn it thinner than that is when I start switching axes, I lose my reference and I don't have a thick enough side to put my center in. But here you can see we've started to get a nice twist here, and I have half again the width. So you're going to take a couple passes, stop, check where you're at, go the other way. Gotta love that step center. It's actually useful that it does that when you're on multi-axes. So stop and make sure you don't hit that circle because you're shaving away towards the circle. And I have a nice twist here. I'm a little higher here, so I'm going to take a little more out there. All right, and I could take this down some more. You have to do this a little bit at a time. Because you are not turning a straight piece of wood. And if you want to jam it in there and really take some off of it, you're going to persuade it to leave its little home between centers. Now it's starting to look like just about where I want it to be. We're almost there. Very, very close. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Now, to sand this, it's very, very unsafe to try to hold your hand up when you're hitting one little spot in air. So I hate to tell you this, but the best way to sand this is by hand. I'm showing you the method. I don't think any of us don't know how to sand, so I don't want to bore you by sanding because I want to teach you how to get your axes lined up. I hope that's all right.
Totally fine.
Okay. So we went from 1 to 2, and for me, sometimes it helps. I wrote it down: 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 1. So you're gonna loosen, and once we take this off the off of between centers, you're never really going to be able to address that surface again. So
Joaquin,
be
have you
happy.
tried power sanding it?
I have. I was very unpleased. I was not pleased with the results. The cool thing about hand sanding it is you just go with the grain,
True.
and it actually goes really fast. You can go. The piece of maple that I turned was really soft, so it actually was softer than the piece Bradford pear because it was heavily spalted. So I had a lot of tear out. So I had to start at 80, and I was done sanding each facet in less than 5 minutes. About 6 or 7 passes from left to right, and you could step up to the next grit. It did sand really fast. Okay, so I started here at 1. So I'm going to put 2. Make sure you can read your writing, because I know you can't read mine. To 3.
Be a good idea to color code it instead of numbering it.
Yeah, that is a good way. All right, so you want to make sure now. See how this is why you can't make your circle too big, because look how close to the edge. If I really drive this in, I'm going to split this out. So be very aware of that. And I'm already starting to see a crack. So I think our good friend, Mr. Thin CA, is going to help ensure that that doesn't walk away from us. If I can get this lid off, this is the worst lid ever. There we go. So I just want to put that there to help encourage that crack not to complete. Again, we will be putting this back between centers. Really? Hang on a second.
I'm glad I've never taken mine too small.
Only in demos.
Yeah. Or in YouTube videos.
Right? Okay. So this end is actually going to end up getting, we're going to put it back between the original axis to centers and put the tenon on this end. So as long as I keep this from splitting, I'm not worried about CA staining or anything. because it's going away. This end is completely going to be eliminated.
We can't
So
see it
again,
anyhow.
right. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better?
No, I meant we can't see the CA staining
Oh.
anyhow.
Right.
Oh, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too light for the camera. I'm looking at it going, oh. All right, let me hit that with some.
Looks good from my house.
Just so that I make sure I don't get sprayed. Okay, again, turn it by hand, make sure you're clear. Okay. As this is spindle, I'm running at 2,700 RPM. That would be a disaster. Now from here, looking at the shadow, I can see the width of my pen. Okay. So again, because of the shape I'm trying to achieve, I want to kind of start in the middle. And at this point, you can see that about how wide your pen's going to be. And you can start to see maybe where your smoothest area is. It's starting to take shape. Take a few passes, stop and check. Look at how close you're getting. So at this point I have, that's the original circle, and I have two facets. And it looks really cool, but I have like weird areas where it's the original circle. I'm not going to turn those away completely, but I need to look and see how close to that, because that's my drop dead line. And I'm getting there. So it's time to start taking some, I need to clean up over here, and then I need to make some very fine finishing passes. Now, I will admit I stacked the deck by giving myself a softer hardwood to do this. Be very timid with a harder species of wood. This can really be challenging. Okay, so we have two facets and it's beginning to look like something. Again, the best bet I've found is hand sanding it. It doesn't take long because we're going with the grain. So it really depends on how hard the wood is. So now, really, the only places we have left to mount it are 3 to 1 or the center. So I'm going to look for 3. And 1. And there is my 4th axis. So we have 1, the first axis being the centers, and then 3 additional that we laid out. And now it's almost pen thickness. So it doesn't seem like we're going to get down to pen thickness, but we actually are. And this is where we're going to get that beautiful twist shape. But do you see the difference in how radical it looks on the 3rd axis or 4th axis?
Like a bow tie.
Yep. And if you're using a stub center, you're going to have to cut light or it stops. So you really have to have a light touch. You can't just go dig it in there. Now, if you were doing something like ebony or blackwood, that's a much harder wood, you probably have a little more control of that. But some rascally old fellow named Mark Solari taught me to do the hard stuff with the softwood first, because if you can do it with the softwood, you can do it with anything. Okay, stop it and check it. Ah, yeah, we're doing pretty good. I have a little bit of a high spot right here I need to fix. That's not bad. Get that little high spot in the center. Okay, that is looking pretty good. Now, again, we're not sanding because we all know how to sand, but if you get a little bit of strangeness, which happens sometimes, you can smooth the sides down with the 80 grit bowl gouge and deal with any kind of little silliness. But sometimes it makes things more unique. So you go back to the center. And you have to very gingerly get a nice, tenon here, because if you turn too much away, you're not gonna be able to fit it in your pin jaws. You don't want to take it down too much. But you definitely need to get enough that you have shoulders that you can kind of rest your jaws on and make sure you stay centered. So again, like I said earlier, this whole section here is waste, but this is where you have to now make a pen. Oh, that was the wrong hole. That was bad. Like Brenda was saying, it's just a minute. If you're putting on your pin jaws, always tighten your safety screw, whether you're just putting it on for a second, putting on another chuck, tighten your safety screw. It's just good practice, muscle memory. Okay, so you want to rest the shoulders, the little shoulders you left, on the edge of the jaw, and bring your live center up and make sure you're centered. then bring out your Jacob's chuck. You've got one. So if you only drill your pens on a drill press, you're gonna have a real hard time doing this. Because the only way that I figured out to do this was to put a tenon down here on one end and take it off. Can't remember what drill. Seven millimeter, well, no, 8 millimeter. All right, just a second. So at this point, as you're getting ready to drill, you want to take a look and just kind of think about, well, what section looks the best in here? Now, remember, we didn't sand because we've all seen sanding, but figure out which section looks the best. And it's probably the nicest up to this end. So I'm going to drill past that. So Stanley says I need to get in there at least 3.5 inches, and I definitely have enough space on my drill. And just take your time, because you're not dealing with a straight-sided piece of wood. You're dealing with something that's been cut in very weird shapes. Oops, I forgot to do something pretty vital. Don't do that. Also should have pulled that out if I could have. If that had been maple, that would have held on to that drill bit. Ah, good old Bradford pear. Didn't smell while I was cutting it, but boy, it smells while I'm drilling it. Got to the end of my short little mandrel, or short little quill. So remember, you want to drill past your depth, you've decided that you like X section of pen, drill past it. It's going to take me to just above the jaws of my Jacob's chuck. So here, you're going to clog the flutes. So this last little bit, you really have to stop frequently and make sure you clear those flutes so that you're not just packing wood in there and heating it up. Okay, so we're drilled well past where we need to be. And again, you've got to do a little assessment of what part of the pen, what part of the body you feel is the best. And what I did, just because I didn't want to try to fish the tube down. So what I did, rather than kind of going in here and saying, well, okay, I'll push it really deep, is at this point, I took it, marked just a hair on either side of the section that I wanted. with the tube's length here. And I just brought up my little dovetail saw, which is on my workbench, or this little one. This is a little Harbor Freight pull saw. This works really, really well. And I just hand cut it. Okay, and I see that I didn't quite drill deep enough. So let me double check again with my depth here. So I can't put it back between centers, but I do have a straight hole so I can stick my drill in there and get through the other side. Put it in a vise is probably the safe way, safest way to do that. But drill through the other side, glue your your tube in and square the ends the way you normally square the ends. It seems more complicated than it is. The hardest part is remembering 1 to 2, getting them lined up first, remembering 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 2 to 3, and 3 to 1. But that gives you a nice, I missed the spot in the middle. That's what happened. But it gives you a nice triangular shape that fits really good in your hands and looks weird. And people go, how did you do that? Any questions?
How do you get it to marry up with your hardware?
Okay, good question. So I've got my pen tube in there. It's glued in right. I've got my end squared. I just put it on the mandrel with the bushings and just turn down this little end, just the end. I forgot about that. Just turn down the end to the bushings, just like you normally would, and sand that little area, and that'll kind of round this over and smooth it. I wish I had another example of the finished pen to show you, but that rounds it out and it makes it all match. So this is going to end up always being a little bit bigger than the normal pen tube that you turn, but because it's shaped like that, look how your fingers just sit on it. It just rests. So I actually had lost the bushings for the pen that I put this on. So the other thing you can do is just get it between centers, and you know what the measurements are because you have the instructions, and just cut a little, but you're just going to turn down this. As long as it's not too steep, you're probably going to turn down about the maybe a quarter at the end, just to make sure that it meets the mandrel so that you don't have this edge here. And it actually looks good and it fits in your hand, which doesn't seem like it would, but it really does.
Right. Pretty cool.
All right.
Pretty
Any
cool.
other questions?
Thank you.
Love
Thank
it.
you.
Real nice.